Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Lockery from Canada's podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs who are making it happen right here in BC. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Stephanie Willer, a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Victoria, as well as an international leader in the field of biomaterials and tissue engineering. She founded the award-winning biotechnology spin-off company, Axolotl Biosciences. The company sells bioinks for printing human tissues. Welcome, Stephanie. I probably did not do an awesome job of explaining that because bioengineering is above my level of understanding. So why don't you tell us what it is that you do?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I'm really excited to be here chatting with you today. So I think a lot of people are familiar with traditional 3D printing, where you have a 3D printer that heats up plastic filament and then you extrude it into different shapes. I know that I have an Ender that's actually in my husband's office right now that we use. So bioprinting is similar to that, but instead of using a plastic filament and heating it up, because cells like those found in your body don't like to be exposed to extreme heat, you need specially formulated bioinks. And our bioink is really similar to Jell-O that support the cells. So when you actually extrude them out into the structures that mimic tissues, the cells stay alive and function. And as you mentioned, I am a professor at the University of Victoria, and we've been working on this technology in my lab. And then we spun out Axolotl Biosciences, actually the week of the pandemic in March 2020. And for those of you who don't know, axolotls are Mexican salamanders, and this is a stuffed one, and they have a highly regenerative nervous system. And we had initially developed our bioink to print neural tissue, so similar to that found in the brain and spinal cord. And my co-founder, Dr. Laura de la Vega, is from Mexico. So this was already an animal that we had loved and talked about. And so we're really excited when it passed legal for it to be our company name.
Okay, that is absolutely fascinating, the work you do, but also that you launched a company just when COVID started. So what made you launch this company and decide to venture out?
Yeah, so as an academic, so bioprinting really started taking off probably in the middle of the 2010s. And so probably some of the people listening are familiar with Aspect Biosystems that makes bioprinters based out of Vancouver that was spun out of UBC. So we actually got their second ever bioprinter they made, and we had troubleshot and developed our product with their technology. And so for people who aren't in the field, for example, when I was a grad student, the way we would make our neural tissues is I would pipette, so like manually with your hands, sort of put droplets of these different materials and cells into wells of the plate, which, as you can imagine, takes a lot of time and effort. So then with the bioprinter, one of the advantages is it can make a bunch of tissues sort of automatically based on the program specifications. So we were really excited to be able to make a lot more of our tissues with a lot less labor. And so that's kind of how we got into it. And then our ink was really the first of its kind. It really supported the bioprinting of stem cells. So prior to our work, if you tried to print stem cells, which are pretty expensive to grow in culture, about half of them would live, and they weren't really functioning like they would in the body. So you could print a neural tissue and the cells might live for like 7 days, but you weren't seeing the electric signals that you would find in the brain or spinal cord. And with our ink, that changed. Around 90% of the cells survived. We got really nice expression of the different proteins you would see in neural tissue. And then we also do see electrical activity. So that kind of was a game changer. So that's one of the reasons we decided to spin out our company, is because prior to COVID, at a conference, a bunch of academics were like, why aren't you selling your ink? And I was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense to sell our ink. So that's how we decided to get started. And also Laura, my co-founder, she had minored in entrepreneurship. So she actually had like a secret plan. We were going to start a business and was waiting for me to come around on it.
I love that. So who do you sell the ink to?
Yeah, so we currently sell to different academics in Canada and the United States. And we have sold some to an incubator in Quebec that had a bioprinter. And so they wanted to get more customers for using it. And then we're also in talks with some companies overseas to do distribution in different countries as well.
Discover the latest trends, strategies, and success stories in the ever-evolving world of business. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
So what are you most passionate about when it comes to the work you do?
I'm a nerd, so I actually think the science is really cool. And I think with the company, something that's been really exciting is seeing what other people use our ink for. I do have a big focus on neural in my work and my research group. And so it's been really cool to see people print things like cardiac tissue. We've recently been collaborating with a new professor at the University of Victoria, Stephen Tufts, on skin and looking at like the bacteria present in skin and wound healing. We also have a really fun collaboration with Ryan Flanagan's group at the Vancouver Prostate Center, where we've been printing testicular tubules from patient-derived stem cells, which is really cool because in this case, the male patients are infertile because they lack the appropriate structure to make sperm, but there are sperm stem cells that can make sperm. And so we've been able to use their own stem cells to make immature sperm. But if we were able to further develop this process to make mature sperm, and I did have to ask him about this when the paper came out, we could actually, those patients then could use the sperm we make in a dish for IVF, in vitro fertilization, which is super cool, to do some of the personalized medicine with the 3D printing.
I love that. So you're transforming healthcare and ultimately people's lives.
Yeah, that one is really fun because it was the first time anyone had, and it's interesting, as I said, I work in neural, which compared to the testes is like there's very well established protocols. We know what cells are in the brain. We know, where they're located. And there's been a lot of work using stem cells to make those cell types. Whereas in what they call the testicular niche, it's not as well defined. So his group is doing some really interesting, very basic biology, just figuring out how to make the different cell types present. And then, as I said, some of the work with the patients, I think is, and we also have similar projects with our collaborator, Dr. Håkan Nygaard, where we can actually take stem cells from patients with Alzheimer's and print tissues from them, and then try and see if there are drugs that would be able to reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's. And so I think those are some of the most exciting things is when we're collaborating with actual practicing doctors. And so you can really see the connection between our lab and then the clinic and the patients.
I love that. I have a father with Alzheimer's, so near to me. So one of the things you said that I'm really curious about is you launched this in March 2020, which was not the best time to launch anything. Of course, you didn't know this. What were some of the challenges you had launching a business at the beginning of a pandemic?
It was really hard to get a bank account because you had to only go in person. It was very interesting because a lot of people started fake companies in the pandemic. So starting a real one, there was a lot more red tape. So I just remember like having to go and remember it was COVID. So like you could get an appointment, like one appointment a week to go to the bank and like do all the paperwork. And the team was initially all remote. So that was kind of interesting. So we always had started with like all of our meetings were on Zoom and sort of remote work culture. And then we were able to get back into the lab and working on the ink a few months later. But it did help us, I think, in terms of business development as well.
So let's talk about business development. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, your company?
Yeah, well, we're working with Vancouver Island Life Sciences to get a biomanufacturing facility here. So hopefully we'll be off campus and producing. We are homegrown tech, spun out of UVic, located in UVic in Victoria. And so it's important to sort of keep our technology local. Team is UVic grads as well. And so hopefully we'll have expanded our product range. We probably are going to be moving more towards some of the clinical translation. Getting our inks and tissues into people would be really exciting to do. And hopefully, continue to grow the biotechnology community here on the island. And I will say that the government has been in British Columbia has been very supportive of biomanufacturing and biotech. And there has been some really, really cool technology here on the island with like axolotl, and obviously Starfish is a big player. And then over in the mainland with some of the work that like Peter Cullis's group has been doing with the vaccines and obviously stem cell technologies and Aspect, of course.
I love that Vancouver Island is leading the way. So let's talk about some of the benefits of having your business based here in BC or even just on the island specifically, because we're a little bit different than Vancouver.
We are. I think that one of the things, and also like shout out to Starfish that just celebrated their 25th anniversary. It is a community. We do all know each other. And like for example, in the pandemic, we were all helping each other out. I had students at UVic that were helping to validate the ventilators being made by Starfish and things like that. So it really is a good community here on the island. And in some ways, I think, not to talk too much about the pandemic, but it was interesting because I think it was easier to coordinate things here on island because everybody knows everyone. So like we were making face shields, I know who's in charge of Island Health. So, we all knew who to contact. And so it was kind of easier to coordinate. Whereas obviously in Vancouver, there's a lot more people and a lot more businesses. Whereas I think also being on the island, it makes you have to collaborate. And I am very excited that the government has decided to invest in biotech in the region. And I do know the different, even the local governments are really supportive of of companies like Axolotl and our technology. And so I think that has been really nice. And also I will give a shout out to Campbell River. We did compete a few years ago in their angel investment competition called NextStream, and like Campbell River's government, more so for manufacturing than like what we do in biotech, but their city was very, very knowledgeable about entrepreneurship. Like and like they would attend like the pitches we would do, and city like their staff members would ask really good questions. And so yeah, I think, and there are like a lot of really interesting companies also up island as well. So I think it's kind of a different flavor. You do see a lot of companies here on island, like focused on like seaweed. And then some of our work is with the forest ministry, looking at putting nanocellulose crystals into our bioinks. So I've become more familiar with the forest industry here on island. And there's just like a lot of really interesting technology being developed.
And I do find the island, being an entrepreneur who's based on Vancouver Island, there's a lot of entrepreneurs here that do work around the world from the beauty of Vancouver Island.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what are some of the challenges you have of being located on the West Coast?
I think being on the island, one of the things with some of the natural stuff that's occurred is, when like the Malahat was broken, like shipping. I just remember we couldn't get shipments in for 2 weeks there when I think that was when Abbotsford flooded, so there's some of those constraints. We do ship internationally. So like having to account for the time to ship our ink to foreign countries has been challenging in some cases. And don't get me started on customs. There's a reason people don't want to sell anything to Spain because they go through everything in customs. And when you have a product like ours, which is both temperature and when you work with cells, you need it to be sterile. So like a very clean environment. So if customs opens up your bioink, it's not going to be good to anyone. And so I think those have been some of the challenges. And then I think also here and in Vancouver, like the cost of living increases have made it a little bit more difficult to recruit. Like definitely when I talk to governments, I'm always like, my students, my graduates, my recent grads, need affordable housing because they all would love to stay here. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's, pretty common across BC.
Absolutely. So what are you most proud of in terms of the work that you do?
Oh, man. I am really proud of like all the students and employees who've trained, and it's just been great to watch them like evolve as engineers and scientists. It's been also really cool to watch our technology evolve and really get adopted, and like seeing how bioprinting has really taken off, even with like Aspect doing their huge deal with Novo Nordisk, with us, our neural tissue models, like just seeing from, going from, okay, we can keep 90% of these cells alive to, okay, we can model Alzheimer's, we can model Parkinson's, just like really big advances in the technology. And it's definitely been great to watch like the students and trainees evolve. It's also been really fun. We've actually had people from all over the world come to both the lab and Axolotl. We hosted a student named Dom from Nottingham who came to do an internship at Axolotl. We've had students from Brazil. And so that's been a lot of fun, is to have people come in, like learn how to use the tech and then take it back with them. Mm-hmm. That's been something that's really cool. And like, I think one of the things with bioprinting that's really fun and interesting, and as an engineer and who does biomanufacturing, one of the really cool things is, so we can send our like CAD files, so the specifications for like what the physical dimensions of the tissue are and how it should be printed. So if you have the same bioprinter as us, we can send you the file, we can send you our ink, and you'll have to grow the cells. But like we've had groups, in different places, use that and print their brain, their version of brain tissue. And so that's been really fun in terms of just from a manufacturing standpoint, you can sort of make these tissues on demand wherever anyone has a bioprinter.
Stay ahead of the game with our expert tips and strategies that will help your business thrive in a digital era. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
Now let's talk about successes. What measures success, but most importantly, how do you celebrate it?
Yeah. I think, obviously when we sell our ink, it's really exciting. Some of our partnership deals have been really good. We have a good team culture, so we'll go celebrate, go out or have parties and things like that. Then we also recognize people at our team meetings who, are doing a really good job. And it's been a good run. So, and hopefully to more successes in the future.
Now let's look at the flip side, fear and doubt. As entrepreneurs and running a business, that's part of it. How do you deal with fear and doubt when it creeps in?
Yeah, I think it helps. Like my business partner, Laura, is really great and our team is really great. So that kind of helps with some of that. I know it was a bit scary last year with like the biotech apocalypse and banks failing and a lot of companies going out of business. So I'm really happy we survived and are now sort of looking to expand. I also run and work out, so that helps to deal with, like, I kind of consider fear and doubt part of like the stress that goes with, running a company. And also it's similar to running a company, running a lab, again, when you're supporting lots of people on salary, right? And like writing grants and doing your fundraising. It kind of goes with that.
So you said that you run, what are the things to get that work-life balance? Because you're still a professor.
Yep.
So you've got a lot on your plate that you're managing. So how do you keep yourself balanced?
So I do run. I do like to read. Hopefully we'll get better snow this year so I can go snowboarding in fall. And I do try to make some time for myself. And I think it helps that my work is really interesting and my team is really great, that makes it, easier to deal with when you're in these types of situations. And, you meet a lot of really cool people, both through academia and honestly through entrepreneurship. There's just like a really good community to support you.
And we do live in a gorgeous place, so we have an opportunity to get out. Yeah. So my last question for you is there anything that you've read, anything that you've heard that you want to share with our listeners that really helps you?
Oh, yeah. So I think just in terms of like being a professor and entrepreneur, I really found Walter Isaacson's biography of Jennifer Doudna, who discovered CRISPR and how she developed that technology in her lab at Berkeley, which was interesting because it was also when I was doing my postdoc at Berkeley. So it's a very interesting read about, doing science, commercializing science, and dealing with people in the space. And while I'm not like the biggest fan of him as a person, he also did the recent biography of Elon Musk, which I think is a really good book for entrepreneurs to read because it is interesting to read how he disrupted things with SpaceX, but also it talks a lot about his relationships with the different employees there and things at Tesla, and then more recently the Neuralink saga. And so I think both those books I think he's a good biographer, and I think both those books provide a lot of insight into the process and the journeys that go into starting companies, and also like developing technologies and how you can commercialize them, and about the process of like leadership, finding the right fit with your teams and things like that.
Well, I think this has been fascinating. I'm really looking forward to following the work that you do. And so finally, if our listeners want to learn more about the work you do, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can probably Google me and find my lab website. We're also axolotlbiosciences.com. Also on LinkedIn and Twitter, so pretty easy to find. And if you're interested in learning more, you can always go to my Google Scholar page. And I have written 2 books on one's a handbook on neural engineering, and I also wrote one about engineering neural tissues from stem cells. So lots of stuff out there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you too. Have a good one.
You too.